Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Jayam Udirayet. Remember, Jayam was one of the names for Mahabharata. It's called Mahabharata. It's called Bharata. It's called Jaya. So, all right. So in our last class, we began this next section, which has Durvasa. I'm sorry. Before we come to Durvasa, we have Vyasa. Vyasa, who goes to meet the Pandavas in the forest. They've been in the forest at this point for many years, and Vyasa sees them emaciated in the forest, and he begins to talk to them about the value of tapas. And in response to that teaching about tapas, Yudhishthira asks a question, just to recap the last class very quickly. Yudhishthira asks, well, what about dana? Is tapas the most important kind of practice, or what is the role of and importance of dana? And to which Vyasa replies that dana as a spiritual practice is more effective than tapas. Why? He says, when you do dana, when you do, pardon me for putting it in these terms, if you do tapas, you suffer once. If you do dana, you suffer twice. Remember that I explained the idea of suffering is an act of expiation. You are getting rid of some of your papa karma. We also talked about getting cooked, getting prepared. I don't want to repeat the whole last class. So in doing tapas, you have one measure of merit. In doing dana, twice, because you suffer twice. How is that? Vyasa explains that if you're giving something away, you suffer in the process of acquiring that money, or whatever it is you're giving away, and then you suffer a second time when you're actually giving it. So he says twice, so it has twice the merit, according to his analysis. He gives us a very important focus on dana. Before we proceed, one of our students had a question, and that is seva, service, considered part of dana? And in this discussion of Vyasa, it's not really included, but there's an interesting connection we can make between dana and seva. Same observation he made about tapas. In tapas, you suffer once. In dana, you suffer twice, because one is the difficulty you undergo in acquiring, and then is the difficulty you undergo in losing, giving away. And there's a similar process in seva. Obviously, in seva, there's some difficulty you willingly undergo for the sake of doing some help. If you volunteer here, you willingly give your effort and time to do so, and it's a small. You undergo some small suffering by doing some work, as it were. But just as in dana, you have to undergo some difficulty to acquire what you're about to give. Similarly, in seva, there's some difficulty in acquiring what you're going to give. Now, what are you giving? You're giving your time. And to acquire free time, in fact, this is so true in modern American culture, to acquire free time is a big thing. Many people don't have that much free time. Many of you have so many responsibilities. Free time is a luxury And that free time that you have is acquired with some difficulty. So in this way, since acquiring free time is done with some difficulty, and then giving of your time is done with some difficulty, there's that same double giving involved in seva. So in that way, seva could be similar to dana in that you're giving twice. All right. Now to explain both of these values, the value of tapas and the value of dana being greater than the value of tapas. By the way, what that just to summarize that last comment, when you do some volunteer work, and I meant to make this comment, it's really an important comment. When you do any kind of voluntary work, seva, you are giving what is arguably the most important thing, that which is acquired with the most difficulty for you, which means time. Many of you, I have to say, many of you acquire money fairly easily. You have nice jobs, you're well paid, and it's not like you're out digging ditches, right? So most of you acquire the money fairly easily, which means to give charity is you're still twice. You're still giving twice, but the point I'm leading up to is it's arguably true that your time is more valuable than your money. And the spiritual value of dana is related not to the cash value. The spiritual value of dana is related to your personal value for what you give. If the time you give is more valuable to you than the money, then that giving of your time is more beneficial as a spiritual practice. Okay, enough said. So, now to illustrate this, we just began the story. Vyasa is narrating the story to Yudhishthira and the other Pandavas to illustrate the value of tapas and the exceeding value of dana. He's going to narrate this very weird story. The weird part is not about Mudgala. Mudgala is a central character. He's a great rishi. And what distinguishes Mudgala is how he supports himself. Many rishis, brahmanas, would support themselves by going out for bhiksha, getting alms. Mudgala did not go out for alms. He did not go out for bhiksha. He supported himself through shilon chavritti. Shila uncha vritti, which means what? A life of shila and uncha. What is shila and uncha? Gleaning grains from fields that have already been harvested. After the harvest, whatever little bit remains, he would go out and get that. And as we commented in the last class, you can be sure that the farmers left very little, which means what Mudgala had to live on was extremely little. So he himself was emaciated because what he gleaned from the fields was so little. That's the setup. And now, given that setup, now the real story begins. We saw that much in our last class. Now the weird part of the story begins when a certain ignominious character, who is that? Durvasa, shows up. And things get very interesting very quickly, so we'll pick up the thread and see that now. Tam tu shushrava dharmishtam, tam tu shushrava mudgalam samshatavratam, mudgalam samshrit durvasa nripa digvasas, durvasa nripa digvasas, tamata bhyajagamaha, tamata bhyajagamaha. In the third line, Durvasa. For our Sanskrit students, Durvasas. masculine sakaranta, a masculine noun ending in the letter sa. So Durvasas becomes Durvasa, nominative case. We should really not call him Durvasa. That's technically incorrect. We should really refer to him as either Durvasas or Durvasa. But the convention in English, Durvasa, grammatically incorrect, but we'll let it slide, as they say. So what about Durvasa? So Durvasa, what did he do? He, in the first line now, Shushrava, he heard. He heard about Tam Dharmishtam Mudgalam. He heard about that very righteous rishi, Mudgala, who was living on gleaning the fields, and this Mudgala who was Samshita Vratam, who was extremely committed to his vows. He heard about the piety of this sage Mudgala, and Durvasa wanted to go to meet him. So therefore, Durvasa, what did he do? Tam Atta Abhyajagama. Atta, then, Tam, unto, to Mudgala, he Abhyajagama, he went. Durvasa went to meet Mudgalam. Nripa is actually Vyasa addressing Yudhishthira. So Vyasa addresses Yudhishthira, Nripa, O great king. Durvasa went to meet Mudgala, and Durvasa is described here as Digvasas, the one whose vasa, the one whose dress is dik. Dik means the directions. Dikvasa, dressed in the 8 directions, means what? Naked. So normally he's not naked. In this story, Durvasa goes to meet him naked. By the way, the very name Durvasa could be understood in several ways. It could mean the one who has improper dress is one meaning for Durvasa. Being naked, I suppose, could be considered improper in certain circumstances. Another common meaning for Durvasa is one who is difficult to live with. So these are the 2 common interpretations. The one who is difficult to live with, or the one who is poorly dressed, are 2 interpretations of the name. He's a strange character. In mythology, he's considered by some to be an incarnation of Lord Shiva's anger. How's that? To be an incarnation of Lord Shiva's anger. And it's often asked, Swamiji, how can a great sage like that be angry? And I'm not sure if did we have that discussion here in the last class? We didn't. You had asked after class. So this question always goes up. If Durvasa is such a great rishi, presumably enlightened, and no reason to doubt that, then how can he be so angry? Well, we really need to understand that enlightenment means the destruction of ignorance that causes suffering. Right? Enlightenment means what? To be freed from suffering, moksha, to gain moksha. How is that moksha acquired? Through the destruction of ignorance of your true nature. Now, if somebody, and actually, it was in satsang, I think this question came up. Yeah, that's where it came up. So the example I gave in satsang is, does getting enlightened change your personality? And your inclinations and disinclinations. And I gave as an example Puja Swamiji, who grew up in a village in South India, so he grew up drinking coffee. After he was enlightened, did he continue drinking coffee? Of course he did. Why should being enlightened change a habit like drinking coffee? In the same way, some people might have their brains wired to be subject to anger. It's a wiring of the brain. Let's be very clear, most anger is due to ignorance. Most anger is indeed due to ignorance. What that means is you are angered because you are prevented from fulfilling your raga and dvesha. And why do you have raga and dvesha? Because of ignorance. When you remove ignorance, you remove raga and dvesha. When you remove raga and dvesha, you remove most causes for anger. But suppose someone's brain, physical brain, is wired to be subject to being angry. It happens. If that's true, not if it's true, it happens. Our brains get wired in certain ways. If a brain is wired to get angry, and if that person gets enlightened, notice that anger due to the samskaras, the wiring of the brain, that anger is not born of raga dvesha. When Durvasa was enlightened, his raga dvesha went away. And any anger due to raga dvesha went away. But it appears that Durvasa is a very odd character, and one aspect of his odd character is that his brain was wired to get angry, and therefore, even after enlightenment, he was subject to anger. So we want to distinguish between anger born of raga dvesha, which is the vast majority of anger, and in unusual circumstances, a brain which is wired. Someone who has deep samskaras, which create anger. And those samskaras, or the wiring of the brain, is not altered by enlightenment. So this explains Durvasa. The stories don't talk about that at all. This is just a Vedantic analysis. The stories say he is an incarnation of Lord Shiva's anger, which is not very, very helpful. And there are different stories about his birth and origin, so I don't think and they're different. There's 3 different stories that talk about how he got born, and they don't even agree with each other, so I don't think it'll be helpful to go through those stories. Except it might be helpful to remind you of a very important story in the very first book of the Mahabharata, where Kunti is blessed by Durvasa. This is where she got her power to call upon any of the gods, and this is how she was able to give birth to the Pandavas by calling upon those gods. So she was blessed by Durvasa. You remember the story that Durvasa came to visit her, and she was a girl at that time, and she was asked to take care of Durvasa. And she was so kind and nice to him, he didn't get angry. It was really unusual for him not to get angry. And because she took such good care of him, then he gave her a boon. And the boon, as you remember, was whatever God you call upon in prayer, that God will come to you. The story is much more complex. We need not go through that whole story now, okay? All right. So this is Durvasa, who apparently has a brain wired for anger, in spite of the fact that he is enlightened, and that has all kinds of consequences, which is what we're going to see in the coming story, and some of his strange behavior. All right. Bibrachaniya tam vesham, bibrachaniya unmat Tahiva Pandava Unmattaiva Vishaka Vikacha Parushavacho Vikacha Parushava Vyaharan Vividha Munihi Vyaharan. Pandava, this is Yudhishthira being addressed by Vyasa. Vyasa says, Pandava, O Yudhishthira, that Durvasa was unmattaha iva. He was like a crazy person. He was bibrat Aniyatam Vesham. He was bibrat. He was appearing in Vesham, dress, which is aniyatam. Niyatam means proper. Aniyatam, improper. Aniyatam Vesham, in improper dress. He was appearing improper dress means no dress. He was naked. And he was also, just this verse of description, you get some picture, mental picture in your mind. He was vikachaha. Vikachaha means one with an uncovered head. Now, uncovered could mean, no, there was no turban or anything covering the head. Could also mean he was bald. So perhaps he was bald. In either event, his head was uncovered. Perhaps he was bald. And he was vyaharan in the last line. That munihi, that sage, the sage Durvasa, munihi. What was he doing? Vyaharan, uttering. Uttering what? Purusha, Parusha, Vachaha. Parushaha, Vachaha. Vividhaha. He was uttering vividhaha, various kinds of parushaha vachas, various kinds of harsh words, meaning curses. He was muttering out loud curses as he approached the Pandavas. So that's why Vyasa says, unmattaha eva, like a crazy person. He had no reason to curse, he had no one to curse, but he's just walking along uttering curses. Walking along naked, his head uncovered or bald, uttering curses. So this is a very strange description leading up to the action that takes place in the next verse. Abhigam yatatam vipram, abhigam yatatam, uvacha muni sattamaha, uvacha muni anartinam anupraptam, anartinam anupraptam, vidhima muni sattama, vidhima. In the middle of the first line, ata, then, abhigamya, having approached tam vipram, that brahmana, that sage Mudgala, Durvasa, having approached Mudgala, Munisattamaha uvacha. Munisattama, the greatest Muni, who is now referring to Durvasa. Interesting, in this verse, that word Muni Sattama is first used, it occurs twice. The first time it refers to Durvasa, the second time it refers to Mudgala. So it's a term of praise, great sage. So the first time the great sage Muni Sattama is Durvasa, who? Uvacha, who says. What does he say? He speaks to Mudgala and he says in the last line, Muni Sattama, O great sage, there the word comes the second time, O great sage, vidhimam, understand me to be anartinam anupraptam. I am anupraptam, I have come, anartinam, I have come for the sake of getting food. I have come. Bhiksha bhavati, bhikshan dehi. Of course, he's not addressing Yudhishthira as bhavati. Bhavan, O Lord, I want some bhiksha, bhikshan dehi. So he says, I have come to get some food. Anartinam anupraptam. I've come to get food. What is the problem? How does Mudgala support himself? By gleaning grains from the fields. He doesn't himself have enough food to eat, and now Durvasa shows up, expecting a nice dinner. So let's see what transpires. Tatas tadannam rasavat, tatas tadannam sahe vakshurayan vitaha, sahe vakshurayan. Bubuje kritsnaman unmattaha. Bubuje kritsnamun mattaha. Pradatasmai cha mudgalaha. Pradatasmai. Last line. Mudgalaha pradat tasmai. Mudgalaha, the rishi, pradat, gave. Tasmai, unto him. Unto Durvasa. What did he give? He gave whatever food he had. He's already not getting enough food himself. Mudgala is already emaciated from not eating enough food, but whatever food he has, he gives it all entirely to Durvasa. Tataha, now back to the first line. Tataha, then, taranam, that food which was given by Mudgala, that food which is rasavat, full of rasa, was fresh. Freshly gleaned, as it were, and that food, saha eva kshudayan vitaha, saha, that Durvasa, who is kshudaya anvitaha, who was stricken with hunger. Kshut is hunger. So kshudaya anvitaha, he was filled with hunger. It doesn't sound right to say filled with hunger. That's what the Sanskrit means. He was stricken with hunger. And what did he do? Bhubuje kritsnam. He enjoyed all the food. All the food that Mudgala had, whatever food was there, he ate it all up. And one more word that stuck in here describing Durvasa is unmataha. The crazy one ate up all the food. Now, you remember that I'm skipping a lot of verses. If I didn't skip the verses, we would spend a month and a half going through the story. It's a very lengthy story. I'm probably giving you maybe a third of the verses. So let me give you some of what we've skipped over. One of the odd descriptions that we skipped over was that the Durvasa, who was unmattaha, crazy, he, in addition to eating a lot of the food, he took some of that food and smeared it over his whole body. Why would anyone do that? Unmattaha means crazy. Something's wrong. So he eats some of the food, he smears a lot of the food over his whole body. Another thing that's left out of this narration, just to keep the narration short, is he came on many occasions. He didn't just come once. He came repeatedly. And each time he came, Mudgala had almost nothing, but whatever Mudgala had, he gave it to Durvasa, and each time Durvasa came, he ate up everything Mudgala had, and each time he came, he also smeared food on his body. So I've left those parts out. You don't mind if we don't see those verses, do you? All right. So, that being so, what is Durvasa's response to all of this? And that's what we see in the next verse. Na chasya manasam kinchita, na chasya manasam kin, vikaram dadrishe munihi, vikaram dadrishe muni, shuddha sattvasya shuddham saha, shuddha sattvasya shuddham sa, dadrishe nirmalam manaha, dadrishe nirmalam manaha. Before we see this verse, just to put this back in context, Yudhishthira is being taught this by Vyasa. Vyasa is teaching the value of dana, and the very interesting observation that Vyasa made, we saw in last week's class, Vyasa said that what makes dana so powerful is when you give that which was acquired with difficulty. That was what we saw in last week's class, and I made reference to that at the beginning of this class. Seva, giving your free time, that which is gained with difficulty, that which is valuable to you, and that which is acquired with difficulty. Well, think about the grains that Mudgala has gleaned from the fields. Gained with great difficulty, right? I mean, he's probably going over acres and acres of field and maybe getting a little basket of grains as a result. So it's gained with great difficulty, and certainly is of great value to Mudgala because he's not getting the caloric intake he needs. He's starving. He's half-starved. So that food is gained with great difficulty and is of great value to Mudgala, and yet he gave it so freely. Could you or I do such a thing? Putting ourselves in that same position. If you were hungry, I mean, imagine being really, really hungry and giving away your food. It's something remarkable. And as we said, and giving away your food to somebody who's naked, who is putting the food all over their body, and doing this repeatedly. It's something absolutely amazing. And in spite of that, now we come back to the verse. In the second line, that Munihi, Durvasa, Dadrashe, he saw, he observed, that in the first line, Asya, for him, of Mudgala, na manasam kinchit vikaram. There was no disturbance of Mudgala's mind. Mudgala did not become upset in the least by any of this that has been transpired. Mudgala, who himself was hungry, and now is watching Durvasa take that valuable food and smear it on his body. Mudgala, who's emaciated himself, and Durvasa is coming repeatedly, not just once. So he came several times to beg food, and in spite of that, what did Durvasa observe? Asya namanasam kinchit vikaram. For Mudgala, there was absolutely no disturbance. Na kinchit vikaram. No disturbance at all of his mind. Manasam. Saha, in the second half, Saha dadrashe. Saha, he, Durvasa, dadrashe, he observed what? Shuddha sattvasya, shuddham nirmalam manaha. Durvasa observed the nirmalam manaha, the pure mind. We would probably use the word pure heart. Shuddham nirmalam manaha, the absolutely pure, taintless mind or heart, Shuddha Sattvasya, of Mudgala, who was an embodiment of purity. He through, and I think this is the one of the points that Vyasa wants to teach through this story, is how did Mudgala gain the capacity to undergo not just hardship, but to undergo this really bizarre encounter with Durvasa again and again without getting irritated. Do you ever get irritated by bizarre people? You know, when you go, you're buying something, and the clerk is in a weird mood and starts to behave weirdly, or you're driving and somebody is driving their car very erratically. Whenever we deal, or even a family member or a neighbor or somebody who's behaving erratically or strangely, it's common we get irritated by this behavior of others because that behavior affects us. The behavior of a driver on the road can affect you. The behavior of that clerk can affect you. The behavior of your friends and family members, it all can affect you. And here, Mudgala is unaffected by the most extreme of situations. How did he acquire that capacity? Samshita vrataha, because he was so committed to his vows of austerity. Now this is, I have to admit, this is not a very popular topic in modern American culture, because we don't like to talk about undergoing austerities. It sounds fine for people who want to live in caves, but for the rest of us, we prefer to live in nice houses and sleep in comfortable beds. And you might wonder, why would anyone willingly undergo so much physical discomfort? And when I would spend time in India and sometimes travel in the Himalayas and like that, I would meet some of these sadhus who lived the most austere lives, literally living in a cave, and very austere life. Why would someone willingly do so? They don't need to do so. They willingly do so. Why would one do so? Why did Mudgala do it? Look at the phala, the fruits of his tapas. Remember this, we're talking about not just dana in this chapter, we're talking about tapas and dana. Admittedly, the main focus of the story is dana, but right now, let's look at tapas, because how is it that Mudgala was so utterly unaffected by this absolutely bizarre, extreme situation? Anyone else would be irritated. Irritated is not the right word. They would be irate. So, you get the point. It is Mudgala's tapasya, his austerity, that made him resistant to irritation. And it makes perfect sense. Look at this. If you live a life where everything is just so nice, everything is just the way you want it, everything is just perfect, this is nice, that's nice, everything is nice, just the way you like it. If that's the way you live your life, then something goes a little bit off, and ooh, that pinches. It becomes a source of irritation. If you're so accustomed to great comfort and luxury, then any little thing can throw you off, can irritate you. But if your life, now this may not be your life, but if your life was really austere, you wouldn't be irritated by all of that. But now here's the question. Would it not be a bad idea? This is the unpopular argument, but let me try to make it anyway. The unpopular argument is this. If you live an extremely comfortable life, isn't it true that the extreme comfort of your situation is making you more susceptible to irritation? And if that's so, might it be appropriate to reduce the comfort in your life for the sake of being more resilient to these sources of irritation? This is the argument for tapasya as a spiritual practice. To be resilient to the irritations of life, we need to be a little toughened up. And let me just, maybe a very simple example. Suppose you're invited to somebody's home for dinner at 7 o'clock. You show up, and you sit down, and dinner's not ready. Okay. 8 o'clock, dinner's not ready. 9 o'clock, we're almost ready. Now, if you arrived at 7 o'clock kind of hungry, by 9 o'clock, you might be getting a little irritable. All right, this can happen. Suppose, as many do, suppose you fasted once a week or once a month or once a fortnight. Suppose that was part of your personal sadhana, your personal practice. Now, before I proceed, please, I'm not telling you what you should do. I don't think it's my role to tell you what you should do. I'm just giving you an example of why these practices are employed. If you were to fast once in a month, or once in a fortnight, or once in a week, if you were to fast regularly, and when you're waiting till 9 o'clock for that food, would you be so irritated? That's the principle. If we live a life of extreme comfort and convenience, we're so much more susceptible to irritation and anger and frustration. But if we willingly set aside some of that comfort, if we willingly take on some kinds of discomfort, that's the definition of tapas, by the way. To willingly take on discomfort is tapas. But now we put it in context. What are the merits of that tapas? Twofold. We had this discussion before. The first merit of that tapas is by undergoing suffering, you are getting rid of papa karmas. So it has a value in expiation. You are getting rid of the papa karmas, so those papa karmas will not affect you in other ways. Those papa karmas could affect you much more severely, but if you get rid of those papa karmas through some expiatory acts, some acts of tapasya, then those karmas are removed. And now we're seeing the second value or reason for tapasya, and that is to toughen us up a little bit, to make us a little bit more resilient, to make us more tolerant. Enough said. Okay. So this is Mudgala, who is Shuddha Sattva, who is pure-hearted. So Durvasa saw this remarkable resistance to irritation and anger in Mudgala, and Durvasa was just amazed by that. Remember, this happened a number of times, so Durvasa is absolutely amazed, and Durvasa expresses the same. Tamuva chatata pritaha, tamuva chatata samunir mudgalam tada, samunir mudgalam tvatsamo nasti lokesmin, tvatsamo nasti Data matsarya varjataha, data tataha, then saha munihi, that sage, referring here to Durvasa. It's confusing because they're both sages. So saha munihi, that sage, referring to Durvasa, who was pritaha, who was very pleased because he was fed so many times by Mudgala, and especially pleased seeing the absence of resentment or irritation in Mudgala. So being pritaha, being pleased, uvacha, he said, Durvasa said, tam Mudgalam, unto that Mudgala, he said. What did he say? Durvasa said, loke asmin, in this world, nasti tvat samaha, there is no one like you. In this entire world, there is no one like you. No one like what? No nasti dataha. There is no, data literally means giver. There is no giver. There's no one who can give in this entire world. There is no one like you who can give matsarya varjitaha, without resentment, without irritation, without any reticence. So it was pretty obvious to Durvasa. Durvasa could see that Mudgala himself was emaciated. Durvasa could see how little food Mudgala had. Durvasa knew the great difficulty with which Mudgala collected that food. And so for all of these reasons, Durvasa is just so tremendously impressed and pleased that Mudgala could give so generously and matsarya varjita, without resentment, without regret, without any kind of irritation whatsoever. And we left out some more verses. So in those verses, when Durvasa is angry, what does he do? Yeah, you in the Hindi movie, Me Shapti Tahun. How many times does that come in his Hindi movies? I curse you. So when Durvasa is angry, watch out. But when Durvasa is pleased, which is rare, he gave many curses in his lifetime, but under some rare circumstances, he gave blessings. And this is one of those rare occasions where he was pleased. When he was pleased by Kunti's service, he gave her a blessing. Now he is pleased by Mudgala's service, his seva, and he gives Mudgala a blessing. What is a blessing? You can go to Swarga. You get to go to heaven. And Durvasa's blessing is so powerful that its fructification is immediate. Which is to say that Mudgala gets the opportunity immediately to go to heaven. I told you, there was a strange story, a wild story, and that's what happens. Look at the next verse. Yatyevam varatastasya, yatyevam varatas, tada durvasaso munehe, tada durvasaso, devaduto vimanena, devaduto, Mudgalam pratyupasthitaha, Mudgalam pratyupasthitaha. Iti evam varataha tasya durvasasaha munehe. For Sanskrit students, genitive absolute, not loctive absolute, genitive absolute. So while this discussion was going on, varataha, while tasya varataha durvasasaha munehe, while Durvasa was still talking to Mudgala, while they're talking, so he's given him the blessing, you're going to heaven, and while he's still talking, what happens is, tada, then, devadutaha, a celestial servant. How's that for a translation? Something. Divine messenger, that sounds better. A divine messenger, Mudgalam pratyupastitaha, appeared before Mudgala. He appeared how? Vimanena, in some kind of celestial vehicle. In some kind of celestial vehicle, a divine messenger appears before Mudgala moments after. So look at the sequence of events. Durvasa is very pleased. It says, I'll give you a boon, you get to go to heaven. And then a few moments later, the chauffeur arrives. That's the sequence. In the 1960s, in amongst the hippie group, some Indianness, some Hindu terms came in. We used to talk about the term used in those days is if you do a good action and something quickly good happens to you, or you do a bad action and something bad happens to you quickly. The expression used in the 1960s, amongst us anyway, was instant karma. That was the expression we used. This is instant karma. You do something bad and then something bad happens to you immediately. Instant karma. Well, this is Mudgala's instant karma. He got the boon from Durvasa And then just like that, the Devaduta, the divine messenger, shows up. He's ready to take Mudgala to heaven. Now things take a very interesting turn. Uvacha chainam viprasham, uvacha chainam vimanam karma bhirjatam, vimanam karma samuparoha samsiddhim, samuparoha sam praptosi paramam mune, praptosi. Now the Devaduta, the divine messenger, speaks to Mudgala. Uvacha, he said, cha enam viprasham. He said to that great rishi, Mudgala. What did the Devaduta say? He says, karma bihi, by your actions, vimanam jatam. You have acquired this vimana, this celestial vehicle which is going only to heaven, doesn't go anywhere else. This vimana is heaven born, so you have, through your actions, through your karma, you have acquired the celestial vehicle which will take you to heaven. And the Devaduta says, Sam uparoha. He says, come on up. Climb aboard. Perfect. He says, climb aboard. Why? Mune, O sage, last line, Mune, O sage, praptaha asi, you have acquired paramam samsiddhim. You have acquired the parama, the supreme samsiddhi accomplishment. You have acquired the supreme goal. You have acquired that which is absolutely the highest. Now, we're not going to see the next verse. In the next verse, we're not going to see. In the next verse, Mudgala is going to question the Devaduta about going to heaven. Is going to heaven really... Let's set the next verse aside. Let's just stay focused here. So Mudgala is told, come on, climb aboard, we're going to heaven. Let's go. And Mudgala thinks, wait a minute, is heaven really the ultimate goal? The Devaduta describes heaven as paramam sadam siddhim, as the ultimate goal. But Mudgala understands it's not the ultimate goal. Devaduta thinks, of course, Devaduta, what he lives in heaven, that's his job. He's going to think that going to heaven is the ultimate goal. But Mudgala is wise enough to know it's not the absolute goal, and he doesn't just climb aboard, and he's going to interrogate the Devaduta about the value of heaven. And this is a good point, just to pause and make an important observation. The arguments will come, and I don't want to get into the arguments here at the end of the class, but there's an important distinction that mostly you already know, a huge distinction between the Hindu tradition and the biblical traditions. The biblical traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all identically hold that going to heaven is the ultimate goal of life. Further, it is a goal that cannot be verified or confirmed. Therefore, it becomes a goal that remains a matter for andha vishwasa, blind faith. A goal that can neither be verified or experienced. So you have to take, if you are a follower of those biblical traditions, you have no choice but just to take the scripture and accept it in an unquestioning way. There's a really harsh American idiom that's used to describe accepting a scripture in an unquestioning way. The harsh American idiom is a reference to the 1960s Jim Jones. And the idiom is this: to accept a scripture without questioning it is to swallow the Kool-Aid. That is extremely harsh. The story goes that this cult leader made his hundreds and hundreds of his followers drink Kool-Aid laced with cyanide. They all died, hundreds and hundreds died. Most of you know that story. Strange, bizarre, tragic story. I think 1970-ish, I forget the exact date of that. So anyway, it come into the American idiom as drinking the Kool-Aid. To accept a scripture in an unquestioning manner is to drink the Kool-Aid. That's a very harsh indictment. That approach is utterly absent in the Hindu tradition. In the Hindu tradition, especially in the tradition of Vedanta, you are constantly encouraged to inquire and even to ask questions. And ultimately in Vedanta, we say that what is to be acquired is not to be acquired through blind faith. Even Sri Krishna says so in chapter 4. You've heard me quote, Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. Shraddhavan, one who has faith, labhate, gains, jnanam, knowledge. The significance of that statement is gaining faith is not the goal. Faith is not the goal. But rather, faith is a stepping stone to gain knowledge, to gain moksha. Notice in the biblical traditions, faith is the goal. Because it's only when you accept the scripture without questioning, only with that faith will that religious tradition bless you completely. Those are traditions that are based on faith and faith alone. In fact, Paul, the disciple of Jesus, says, through faith alone will you be saved. It's so absolutely clear in that tradition. And here we reject andha-vishwasa and we engage in a process of inquiry. What we're going to discuss in the next class is that heaven, Swarga, where Mudgala has earned the right to go to heaven, and he's going to end up rejecting heaven because heaven is not paramam siddhim, as the Devaduta says. Devaduta thinks it's paramam siddhim. He thinks it's the absolute goal. Mudgala thinks otherwise. And when we meet next time, we're going to see this discussion between Devaduta and Mudgala, where Mudgala questions the validity of declaring that heaven is the highest goal. So first of all, the very fact that they're having a discussion about it substantiates what I'm saying. We don't accept anything as on blind faith. If Mudgala was such a person who just accepted on blind faith, Devaduta shows up and says, heaven is the highest goal, get in the chariot, let's go. If Mudgala had that kind of faith, he would hop in and the chapter would be over. That's not at all what happened. So this is a very surprising turn of events, and we'll see that in our next time for the class. Not next week, and I'll tell you, I have some announcements to make, and we'll come to that. Before we come, since we're talking about next week, next Saturday, we're celebrating Vijayadashami. And we do that here by doing Saraswati Puja, which we'll do in a very nice way. So in place of our usual classes, please come at 11 o'clock. We begin, as you know, with some simple puja and chanting. Then I'll have a nice pravachan. We'll have prasad after the program. So if you're coming, there's a sign-up sheet on the counter. Please sign up to bring a dish of food. That will be next Saturday. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our program for children at 11 o'clock. At 5 p.m., mindful movement and meditation led by Vasanti. At 6:15 p.m., I'll lead an advanced meditation session. So please come and join us tomorrow. Now, I need your help with something. Last week, I mentioned that we needed some volunteers to help do some light cleaning after Saturday classes. We also needed some volunteers to help tell stories to children on Sundays as part of our children's class. And no one... I asked to contact Vasanti. Vasanti is trying to organize all this. No one contacted Vasanti last week, so Vasanti has some problem that she has to deal with here. I want your help. We just got done talking about Dana and Seva. Gosh. Honestly, the most valuable thing you can give. I mean, to be honest, you are already giving generously. You've never heard me complain about donations, right? Because you're giving generously. That's wonderful. I mean, it's really a great blessing. You're giving generously. My request is perhaps if you have some time, the give of your time is so valuable. So if you are free to help a little bit after class on Saturday, some light cleaning, if you would be free to help tell stories to children, that's kind of a fun thing to do. Please contact Vasanti. That would be very helpful. Oh, here's a different kind of seva. And also another issue. I stopped class a few minutes early because I knew I would have to, these announcements would take a couple of minutes. Here's something else. After our class, I noticed a fairly large number of people leaving before the arati. And I cannot say you should stay for arati because I won't say. That's not my style. That's what I learned from Puja Swamiji. What you do what you want to do, but it seems sad that so many leave. So instead of telling you what you should do, here's another approach. Perhaps we can make our arati a little bit more engaging and compelling. I have such fond memories of being in Rishikesh, and especially for evening arati, where you hear up and down the river, where there are dozens of temples and ashrams, and in each temple and ashram, what do you hear? You hear the arati going, and what you hear in particular, you'll hear the conch shell, you'll hear a damaru. This is very North Indian, and you notice this one. This particular gong is used, I don't think it's used much in South. There's very much in North. In fact, I think these are made in Tibet, but they're very popular in North India. They have this very distinctive sound. So in Rishikesh, what you hear about 6 p.m. up and down the river, you hear, and it's a particular rhythm. It sounds like this. It's a 2x2 beat. Now, the reason I'm boring you with all of this nonsense is we would like to introduce some of this into our arati. For me, it would be just delightful because I have such fond memories of hearing all of this in India. And I'm hoping that it might make the arati a little bit more compelling for you to participate. So we're going to start that. And I mentioned seva. We need some volunteers to do what I just did. It has to be done in a certain rhythm, and what I would request, if we can have, if 3 or 4 of you who would like to do this, stay back after class. I'll explain, there are 2 different rhythms that need to be used. I'll explain the rhythms to do, and then starting, not next week, because next week we have our celebration. Actually, starting next week. Yeah, with our celebration, why not? We do arati at the end of the celebration. So starting next week, we'll do that. So if 3 or 4 of you would like to stay back after class, I'll show you how that's done, and then we can start to incorporate that in our arati. That'll be delightful. I'll feel like I'm back in Rishikesh. That'll be so nice. I will like that. Okay, library will be open after class, and we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschya Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.